Welcome to the City of Bakersfield Planning Commission meeting. This television broadcast is made available through cooperation with the local cable companies, the County of Kern, and the City of Bakersfield. The Planning Commission meets on the first and third Thursdays of each month. You can watch the rebroadcast of this meeting Saturday at 7 p.m. and Sunday at 10 a.m. The planning meeting agenda is posted on the city's website at www.bakersfieldcity.us. Presiding over today's meeting, Barbara Lomas.
Good evening. It is my pleasure to call to order the April 5th, 2018 Planning Commission meeting. Madam Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Commissioner Lomas?
Here.
Commissioner Bell?
Here.
Commissioner Cater?
Here.
Commissioner Coleman?
Here, sorry.
Commissioner Rudnick?
Here.
Commissioner Wade?
Thank you. Could you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Salute, pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And we have quite a few students in the audience. Welcome. It's a pretty short meeting, so I'd like to just share with you that this commission provides an opportunity for public participation in the development process throughout the city of Bakersfield. The Planning Commission considers a wide variety of projects, including subdivision maps, zone changes, general plan amendments, and more. When applications are received, the City Planning Division analyzes the request. Planning staff will present the facts about the project along with their recommendation to this Planning Commission, who will approve the item or make a recommendation as appropriate. Our goal is to carefully consider each project and make a decision that will balance individual rights with public welfare and the general well-being of our community. So, folks, that's what we do here. We are in our agenda, public statements. This is the time that we receive public statements. It's reserved for anyone wishing to address the commission on any matter that's not on this agenda or the consent calendar public portions of the agenda. If you're here on items 5A through 5E or 6A, this is not the time to speak. Does anyone in the audience wish to address the commission? If so, please come forward and state your name. Thank you. Microphone.
My name is Eric Giroux, and I would just like to address the issue of the proposed renaming of Stone Creek Park. Under Section 6.2 of the Municipal Code, this body has responsibility for renaming streets. And this is quite a similar issue. And I would just like to say that I don't think this is in the city's best interests. There are some serious political issues going on here. Sikh militant terrorism in Canada, they've been blowing jetliners out of the sky. They've done all kinds of terrible things. And this is basically a political ploy to get us to take sides in a foreign conflict that doesn't benefit the USA. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to address the commission? Thank you. We will move on to consent calendar, non-public hearing. This agenda item typically involves housekeeping or administrative matters that don't require a public hearing. Does any commissioner wish to remove a consent calendar non-public hearing item for separate consideration? Nope. Then may I have a motion to adopt staff's recommendation on the consent calendar non-public hearing items?
I'll make a motion to adopt the staff recommendation for item 4B.
Thank you, Commissioner Coleman. Commissioner Cater?
Can we have that motion for 4A and 4B?
Oh, I don't know. Yeah, one of them's the
Do you need
approval
that
of the
language?
minutes. Are we approving the minutes too?
You need that language? Okay.
Yes.
Consent calendar,
Okay.
that,
So, okay, so I guess I got ahead of myself. Because we're approving the minutes from last meeting and item number B.
for A and 4B.
So we're 4A and 4B.
That's correct.
Does that suffice?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Cater, do I have a second?
I will second that.
And this is a roll call vote.
Commissioner Lomas?
Yes.
Commissioner Bell?
Yes.
Commissioner Cater?
Yes.
Commissioner Coleman?
Yes.
Commissioner Rudnick?
Yes.
Thank you. Moving on to consent calendar, public hearings. This is agenda item 5, if you're following along. The next agenda section includes public hearing items that are considered routine or non-controversial. These items have been reviewed by staff and are conditioned in accordance with the requirements of our municipal code. The Community Development Ms. Ng, who is our principal planner, will read each of these items on the consent calendar to ensure that the public has an understanding of all the items that are to be considered. If you'd like to speak on an item, please come forward after the items are read and ask that those items be removed for separate consideration. If no items are removed by a member of the public or by a commissioner, the commission will vote on all the items together in one motion without further comment. Ms. Ng?
Good evening, Planning Commission. Item 5 is the consent calendar for public hearings. 5A is zone change number 17-0443. This item has been withdrawn by the applicant. Item 5B is Plan Development Review number 17-0324. Hockhauser, Blatter Architecture and Planning have requested a planned development review to allow a 78-unit multiple-family dwelling development on 4.78 acres in an R1 PUD zone district located at 9248 Stein Road. Item 5C is an extension of time for vesting tentative track map 6730. McIntosh and Associates is requesting a 3-year extension of time for this tentative map that consists of 72 single-family lots and a commercial lot on 40 acres located north of Palladino Drive on both sides of future Ravani Drive in northeast Bakersfield. Items 5D through 5G are all located in this adjacent one another, approximately 1/2 mile south of the existing Rio Bravo Golf Course. Randy Berquist has requested a 3-year extension of time for tentative tracks 7167, 7168, 7169, and 7170. These tracts are subdivided primarily for single-family development and open space lots. It also includes one multiple-family lot and a lot for a future fire station. Item 5H is an extension of time request for vesting tentative tract map 7186. McIntosh and Associates is requesting a 3-year extension of time for this tentative map that consists of 103 lots for single-family residential and various park and landscape lots on 40 acres located at the southwest corner of Snow Road and Allen Road in northwest Bakersfield. Staff is recommending approval of all these projects. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes, oh, hold on. I got to do a little bit of procedure. At this time, I will open all of the consent calendar public hearing items. So at this time, is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak on any of the items that were just read? Seeing no one, any commissioner wish to remove any item? I also see no one. At this time, the public hearing on all of the consent calendar public hearing items are closed. May I get a motion to adopt staff's recommendation on the consent calendar public hearing items incorporating all staff memoranda and revised staff recommendations, if any?
I make a motion to approve 5A through H on the consent calendar.
That's Commissioner Bell, thank you. Can I have a second?
I'll second that, thank you.
And that's Commissioner Coleman. This is a roll call vote.
Commissioner Lomas?
Yes.
Commissioner Bell?
Yes.
Commissioner Cater?
Yes.
Commissioner Coleman?
Yes.
Commissioner Rudnick?
Yes.
Thank you. And as I said, in beginning of these were all pretty routine, not pretty exciting. You guys should be pretty grateful you didn't have to listen to all of that dry, because it was a very routine evening. I know there's a lot of you out here. But for your enjoyment, we have a presentation from staff on a parking project for downtown. Take it away.
Good evening, Chair Lomez and Commissioners. I'm getting my little timer here. And everybody in the audience, thank you for having me. My name is Brianna Carrier. I work in the City Manager's office, and I was the point of contact with Quantum Consulting, and they were the ones who did our parking study downtown. So this is a presentation here. It's pretty condensed. It's just mainly a lot of the highlights from the study. Quantum Consulting gave us a really exhaustive look at downtown, so that's what I'm going to be presenting to you here. Okay, thank you very much. Alrighty, so just getting a little bit into the background of this project. Last year in April, City Council adopted this goal to try and increase residency downtown to 10,000 people by 2030. The city has embarked on different ventures to try and make that a reality, and this parking study is one of those. So last summer, there was a partnership with Kern Council of Governments where we received a grant to do this parking study downtown, and their agreement was approved last fall in November, and they began work in December. The objectives of the study were very simple. This was strictly a parking study. It wasn't kind of like a holistic downtown look. It was looking at the current conditions of parking in the downtown. So they looked at things like capacity, demand, and turnover, and trying to enhance our enforcement and management downtown. This was the general project area. It spans Area 1 and Area 2. Area 1 was the one we really wanted to focus on. That's where a lot of the core commercial, restaurants, retail businesses are. Area 2 was sort of supplemental, but we did have some concerns about some of the congestion around the medical campus up there. So Quantum Consulting was able to do both areas for us. A little bit about their methods. So there's about 150 blocks in that Area 1 space. They gave us data on 6 days of the week. So they did weekdays during the day for 3 periods. They came during a First Friday event in February. And then they also did a midday on Saturday. So that's just kind of a sample of their data collection there. And I wanted to get really quickly into the findings because this is where a lot of our recommendations are going to be heading towards. Pretty much what we found overall is that our downtown area has the capacity to meet the demand, especially peak demand. So if you look at that little chart down there in the corner, on-street parking, city on-street parking, about 2,800 spaces. Off-street is our 18th and I Street parking garage, and that's about 509 spaces. So about 3,300 spaces in the city that's available and it's free, aside from the parking garage after 2 hours is $1 per hour. So that's a good thing. We have the capacity to meet demand. The other side of that is that we have kind of some hot spots of really high occupancy, high usage, mixed with some really low usage. So if you look at sort of the second bullet under supply, they saw about less than half usage throughout that Project 1 area. So there's some room to have efficiencies there. And a lot of the low usage was pretty much east of Chester and kind of north of 22nd Street there. Another finding that we'll see time and time again throughout the presentation is the very low turnover downtown. That what they saw was people who will park in the same spot all day, and they might even see the same car there day by day. So that was an issue. A nice thing that came out of it was that they're very complementary of our parking malls. And just a quick definition, the parking malls are those one-way streets on 19th and 20th Street with the diagonal parking. And they say that that's a structure that works well for Bakersfield, that other cities have tried it, but because of our volume, that it's something that is successful here. So they want to expand on that. Additionally, there's 17 different time limits within Area 1, and a little later I'll show you kind of how confusing that can be and like how hard that is to enforce. Again, low usage in some areas. There's about 60 blocks that are used at 30% or less. And something that also came out was the parking garage. Not entirely surprising because we do have software that tracks that, But their counts kind of went in and confirmed what we know, which is that it's really underutilized. During the day, daily, it sees about 30% usage, and the highest that they saw throughout all of their counts was 44% usage, and that was during the first Friday event. So there's a lot of room for improvement with the parking garage as well. And interestingly enough, Area 2, that supplemental area up north of 24th Street there, was pretty highly used. Their weekly demand is about 72%, so they have some recommendations to try and alleviate that as well. I'm going to kind of go through a couple of maps here, and this first one that you're going to see is Area 1. You're going to see it's condensed down a little bit. Essentially what they did was they kind of thought it was a big area to look at. They wanted to focus on the high-use streets, and some of those might look familiar as being really congested, like I Street and the parking mall area. And it didn't really change much, changing the focus of the map. Again, all of Area 1 was 48%, and condensing it down, it went to 51. So that just kind of shows you how low the usage is outside of those borders there. Yeah, 152 in the garage that day. This is just kind of a concentration of blocks that are over 75% usage. Probably looks pretty familiar too. A lot of our recommendations are going to be focusing on trying to spread that out. This was the first Friday event. And this is, you know, it's great to see this many people downtown. That's what we want for the downtown. We want customers, we want visitors. And a lot of these blocks, what they noticed was 75% to 100% usage. And they looked there from like 6 to 11 o'clock at night. But again, that was the night that the parking garage was only 44% full. And that parking garage is a little star there. So this area, blue area here, is where First Friday happens. It's right next to the event, but it's not full, even though we have all these other streets. So we'll hear a bit more about that, and especially from the community meeting that we had. And the last map here is a Saturday. So they saw about 30% usage. Again, a lot of clustering in that core area next to the parking garage there. 42 cars in the garage that day. So getting into the recommendations here, these are really general. They apply both to Area 1 and Area 2. Essentially, they want to streamline the time limits downtown. We don't want to see any more of a 30-minute here, 10-minute here, 90-minute there. They like to make it really consistent down to 1 hour, 90-minute, and 2-hour parking. Additionally, they feel that we should just remove time limits in areas where we see less than 25% usage. So that's kind of those outside of that border area, east of Chester, a little bit north as well. They want to adjust the enforcement zone to really focus on those areas that need high turnover. And again, promoting the 18th and I Street parking garage, a lot of room there. And not only did they have these general recommendations, but these last two are kind of, they provided us with pretty much a block-by-block recommendations, and that's like where curb marking needs to be redone, re-signing, and restriping, which sounds pretty simple, but I wanted you guys to take a look at this map real quick, which is just a section of a map that I believe the city did for the Downtown Business Association. And each of these little tiny dots is either a parking sign or some sort of time limit. And you can kind of see that it's not really intuitive. Even if you look at the legend here, there's a myriad of different regulations downtown. So the recommendations are pretty simple to try and streamline that and to try and make it consistent, and 3 time limits and removing signs, and but it's going to be kind of a big venture. So that's something that the city is going to be looking towards. And then, so what I just kind of mentioned to you there were their short-term recommendations, things that can be done relatively quickly. These are their sort of longer-term recommendations here. One is to establish new parking malls. And again, those are those, this map here is where the blue ones are where there are currently parking malls along 19th and 20th. There's 18 of them. And parking malls are generally, they can hold more spaces than a parallel park space. They can hold about 40% more. And installing 2 new parking malls on G Street would bring those spaces from about 16 to 30. So they want us to look at installing those. And again, the parking malls are really highly utilized. They were something that was over 75% most of the time. And another recommendation that would be long-term would be to look at gradually removing 30-minute parking spaces. And just a little bit of background on those. A lot of those spaces, I won't go back, but a lot of those spaces came at the request of businesses wanting to have a way for their customers to just go in and out really quickly and make a quick transaction. in a convenient space, and the city has accommodated and put them throughout downtown. It's just the issue is they're almost impossible to enforce. You can't really make that promise that, you know, you're going to have that turnover that you'd like to see. So to try and still meet that need, the consultant has two kind of recommendations here for us to embark on, and that's either adopting 20-minute metered spaces in those parking mall areas or to install loading zones in the areas. And I just wanted to kind of emphasize and expand a little bit more on the idea of the metered spaces, because that's something that the city would not go out and do without really careful outreach. That's, again, a long-term recommendation, and it's something that the way that they propose it here was essentially 1 per block of the parking malls. So we currently have 18, we would add 2 more, 20, 2 per parking mall, and that's kind of where they got their 40 number from. So that's something that would take a lot of outreach, but has additional benefits that we think we saw a decent amount of support for at our community meeting, where it would be appropriate, where you'd still be able to have that space in front of a business, people can go in and out transactions, but another great benefit of them is they're generally self-enforcing. People don't really want to be parked in the spot that has the flashing light next to it. So that is something that the city would look at after outreach with local businesses. And just for some scale, only installing them in those parking mall areas, that represents very nominal 1.4% of all of our on-street spaces. So generally still, as of right now, aside from our parking garage, which is $1 after 2 hours, parking downtown is free. I just wanted to include this quickly because they do mention and they give us some future strategies, and this is contingent upon all of these other things being done. It's really just guidance for very far into the future and long term if the city ever wanted to embark on them. Things such as the idea of a park and ride shuttle to kind of accommodate a need that might come with the high-speed rail station. But again, this study was based on current situations, so they do give us some guidance to look into things in the future. But right now, we're going to be looking at their short-term and long-term recommendations. In the community meeting, this was a really bright spot in the study because we had really good active discussion during this time. We had about 30 participants. It was hosted at the superintendent's office. And generally what we saw was that a lot of their questions and comments were reiterated from the report. A lot of them were addressed. The lack of turnover was a big issue. Business owners feel that they have employees from other businesses parking in front of their stores that their customers can't get in, and they're really looking for a solution to that. One thing that was relate to them is that the city garage actually also has something called a $1 a day program, and that's essentially that you can park in the city garage pay for the whole month is $30. So essentially it comes out to about $1 a day. So that's something a lot of people just didn't know, and they wanted their customers, they wanted their employees to know that. Something else that was great that came out of there was the idea of removing the stalls on the first floor, that it gets congested in there and it's hard to maneuver. So that's something that we'll look into as well. Additional comments were on bicycle and pedestrian safety, the idea of doing shared parking with private lots, and then trying to even expand beyond the parking malls and more diagonal parking downtown. So these last 2 slides here, what you're going to see is it's almost going to mirror what their recommendations were. These are the slides and the list that we're going to be taking to City Council next Wednesday. So pending their approval of the report and directing staff to act on this, this is what staff would do were they to approve this. And that is essentially doing what the recommendations say. We're going to be looking at removing time limit signage. We're going to be replacing, trying to streamline, very much kind of removing that visual blight of all of those signs downtown and replacing those. Restriping, painting, maintenance where it needs to be done. That picture up there is just what the first floor of the parking garage looks like. It's about 16 or 17 spaces, so we'll look into doing that as well. Doing some education with local businesses on the parking rates, and also providing guidance to enforcement so that they can have some more consistent enforcement in the area. And again, that's just a photo there that has, I think it's like a 30-minute and a 15-minute sign kind of right next to each other. Things like that are not very productive. And then again, kind of mirroring their recommendations longer term, Looking into the year to come, we're going to be looking at constructing those new parking malls on G Street going north. So that's something we'll be doing, as well as implementing, or not even so much implementing, but starting that outreach with businesses to see if meter parking is something that would be appropriate for them. In addition to that, what's come out of the discussions with staff and some leadership within the city is the idea that essentially in order for the parking situation to be successful downtown, we need effective and consistent enforcement. So that's something that we've been in contact with the police department with. We've had one of their lieutenants involved with the project from the beginning, and he's been very helpful. So something that's also come out of all these recommendations is adding an additional technician to their complement, which in the report, it does explicitly state that once all of these recommendations would be put in place, that they're confident they feel it could be enforced well with about 2 to 3 officers, or 2 to 3 technicians. So that is what we are going to be looking to do, and that is the end there, and I'd be welcome to any questions.
Thank you, Brianna. Can we bring up the lights, please? Does any commissioner have any questions? Let's see, Commissioner Rudnick.
Yeah, okay.
Good evening. Thank you for the informative discussion or talk there. A couple of things come to mind. I know $1 an hour seems like very minimal, but some people, there's a mental block in their head. I wish the city could give 4 hours free or something like that, so maybe when there's an event downtown, people can use more of that garage. I know in the Ventura area, they have a public garage which is used a lot, and they have very inexpensive parking there, less expensive than even our $1 an hour after a couple hours. The other thing was, I didn't know if the office was looking at it, but when you go to an event at the Fox Theater, there's parking, and I forgot the name of the credit union that's just like catty corner from the Fox, and they have a lot of lots there. Is there some way that the city can pay them a nominal fee per month so that they will not charge people $5 or whatever they charge them to park there for these events? Because it's very convenient, and it would be an advantage for the city to have that nominal parking by the Fox. I'm not sure if they've ever looked at that at all.
We looked, so private parking lots weren't a part of the study. They did look into some of them for us, just for, informational purposes. I think something like that, like a shared parking situation,
Right.
is one of those kind of longer-term future strategies. So there is some guidance in the report on it. I'm not sure it's something that we're looking into immediately.
It would be great, and I know folks that go there for concerts or other events would really appreciate that.
Okay,
It's,
great, thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Coleman.
Thank you. So I wanted to get some clarity on what you're proposing for I wanted to get some clarity on what you're proposing for metered parking. You talked about having, it seems like random willy-nilly parking meters in these parking malls. Some spaces will have them, some spaces won't. I don't understand that logic.
So, if possible. So they wouldn't be sporadic or randomly placed. I think that 40 was just kind of a number that they gave to us as sort of a pilot program, that it would be a very small start in the downtown area. So it definitely wouldn't be random. This would be something that we would have to do outreach specifically with those businesses aligning those streets, where if they think that would be something useful for them, then that's where we would look at placing them.
Well, you talked about adding 20 of these spots in the mall on 19th Street, and then 4 of them are going to have meters in it?
I'm sorry?
You talked about adding a parking mall on G Street.
Yes.
Between 19th and 20th. And then you're going to put 4 metered parking.
That's-
So of all the spaces there, 4 of them are going to have meters, the rest of them aren't?
Yes, but that would be, again, after, if they were required. The 40 is just kind of or not even required, if they were if they were requested, I guess we'd say. The 40 was, again, was just kind of an estimate, and that's only after we install those, the parking malls there. There still needs to be an engineer study, and traffic engineering would have to look into that even before the G Street parking malls were installed.
And did they give you any indication of why people don't park in the downtown parking garage?
They have some ideas. One of them during the First Friday event that they write about is they actually would go through and try and get into all of these parking garages. And what they saw was there's just a huge line of people. They felt that the ticketing system was kind of cumbersome, that driving in there was cumbersome, so there'd be a long line. People would think it was full, and they would just kind of turn and go somewhere else. So at least for the special event parking, that's something that they thought contributed to that. As far as the daily parking, they didn't really mention why they thought people might stray away from that, other than there is something in there where they're kind of used to seeing cities in other parts of the state where their parking capacity is almost full, almost 100%. So they'll see people who are willing to walk multiple blocks, 4 or 5 blocks, to get somewhere where they want to go. And I think generally what they've observed here is that people really do want to just park right in front of where they're trying to get to. And they feel that the parking garage is in a pretty key place, especially given the concentration that they have around it. It's just perhaps that mindset that it's not directly where I want to go. So that's probably the only thing I could assume they felt about it.
And do we manage that parking garage,
We-
or do we contract that out? I'm not sure how that's done.
We do. We contract that one out.
You contract that out?
And and
And
that's.
that's something we own, the city owns that parking garage?
Yes, and finance manages that contract.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Cater.
Hi, thank you. Oh, sorry about that. Thank you for the presentation. It's great to see the strategies. And I think I have a couple of questions. A few were inspired by the other commissioners. But first, I was just curious about the timeline for implementation.
Yeah, so the short-term recommendations that we're looking at they're kind of more near-term ones that we feel we could probably start acting on within this fiscal year. Long-term recommendations, we'd be looking towards next fiscal year to be doing.
Because I do think one of the central parts of this study is making downtown more user-friendly. And I think the sort of bizarre culture that we have right now where you can tell someone, go ahead and park in that 30-minute, they don't really enforce, is not very user-friendly for somebody who's not acquainted with the fact that most streets aren't enforced during the day. And so I think clarifying that will provide a lot of great, because people come downtown, some need hours, some need just 15 minutes, and I think wayfinding can go a long way of providing clarity and kind of testing those assumed cultural norms and saying, if we were coming here from out of town, would this make sense? And so I appreciate that.
Thank you.
I did have a question about the parking mall concept. And I appreciate the need to study things in a very current situation, but you had mentioned at the beginning that this parking study was somewhat predicated on the idea that the council's goal of 10,000 residents, which is, I think, double the population of the current residents downtown. So I was curious about how the city is considering adopting the need for future parking malls as, if the council goals are met, areas that are not currently impacted will become impacted. And is that, is parking malls seen as a strategy that beyond G Street and beyond our sort of immediate dense core of the arts district that could expand north as the hospital district encourages and east as Mill Creek develops further? I was just curious if there's any implementation of, how future streets are assessed, be it east, north, west of the sort of dense red zone right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that was kind of a consideration too, is that the idea of, building more housing downtown and really trying to get people to live there was something we wanted them to consider. So just kind of your 3 points here, looking into the future and seeing, do these recommendations stand the test of time a decade, 2 decades from now? Essentially there is a section in the report that talks about what would the case scenario be if there was like a full build out downtown. So they kind of took a look at, I believe it's the 50% reduction in code. They looked at the amount of lots, if those were fully built out. And even after they did that, I don't have the figures exactly in my head, they still felt that 10 years from now, the capacity could be met
Okay.
if the current development was fully built out. So they felt still pretty confident about that. A little bit about the hospital. Something I didn't mention about Area 2 in the project study was that there is hospital parking there. There are medical office parking, situations there that just aren't being used, and they're code required, and a lot of people are using the on-street parking. So they want that area really heavily enforced to try and encourage more people to use the ramps and the lots and things there. So that's at least as far as the that medical area. And again, the Mill Creek area kind of going east, that was some of the areas that they felt there is low usage currently. There are some streets there that are pretty highly used. There are some pretty popular businesses in that part that they're also embarking on a diagonal situation and trying to increase capacity. And there's generally support for these parking malls, so we could likely see more of them.
Great. And then can I ask one more? Am I putting you guys to sleep? Sorry. And then my last questions are about the current infrastructure. I would just say I really applaud and encourage the study of looking at how we can share or utilize parking structures that are maybe utilized during the day for evening events. I think a lot of great cities, like I know Pasadena had a pretty interesting program when their downtown turned around that, looking at a parking structure as a 24-hour thing and not tied to an 8 to 5 business day, and how those strategies could work. And then as far as the parking garage on 18th and I applaud the city. I was curious if you have the number. I know about a year or two ago, some programs were implemented, a pay system, an arm that worked, were implemented to increase capacity. And has that shown to provide a little bit more occupancy than what we were seeing maybe 5 years ago? Do you know those numbers?
I don't have the numbers off the top of my head. We can run reports, but that was before my time.
Yes, understood. Well, and I would just see, I think it seems like it's more used than it was maybe 5 years ago, and I think the city could still consider additional signage strategies. Like I know a lot of cities have, I think it's all about providing information to the public, and they'll have each level will. There'll be a read in when you go into the garage, how many spaces are available on level 2, on level 3, on level 4, so that you kind of, even if you have to wait to get into it, that when you get to level 5, there's going to be 55 spaces. And so it kind of incentivizes you to wait at the arm, but then that the end game is not going to be coming back down and having to leave. So.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good point. Thank you. Commissioner Rebel.
I'll try to make mine quick. So,
Take your time.
take my
Riveting.
time. I got all night. I got nothing else
Very
going on.
exciting crowd.
So to be transparent, I've been involved in this parking issue and have a number of properties downtown. But one of the greater issues, I don't know that I've discussed it with you, but is we've always wanted a district downtown. And when we district, meaning arts district, entertainment district, education districts, that type of thing, then we know the eventuality will be difficult parking because those districts will be more heavily used. To Commissioner Rudnick's point, another parking garage is probably one of the greatest possible things that could happen to downtown, and I kind of like the idea of exactly the property you're talking about over there. Because many of those properties in the core of what you're talking about are subletting their parking to other properties. And that consideration was taken up in the parking report a little bit. But the only way to relieve that problem is to have a central parking garage that they can, because I know even in the 18th and I parking garage, about 120 units of that are sublet. And then another large amount of units are given in perpetuity to the Padre to get them there. They pay for it. It's a lease. So a lot of that wasn't brought up. But going forward, if we were to pick a large spot that we could do a major parking garage and let some of these tenancies, especially in older buildings, that investment will pay off in getting more residential downtown and more developers spending the money that we need to have in downtown, making these three-story structures where there would be residential on the third floor, maybe offices on the second, and retail or restaurants on the first. So encouragement that a lot of people are watching. The parking garage idea is a real relief valve to the future. And I can tell you too, knowing firsthand with my particular shopping center, I have an entire 100 parking stalls across the street, 100 feet away. I've got 7 signs on my shopping center, cannot get them to park across the street. So all of you going to Starbucks and you can't find parking downtown, y'all, it's 100 feet away, I promise. It's right across the street, but they won't. They want to park on site and don't want to go across the street. So encouragements, thank you for the report, very well done. Excited about getting the city to take the next steps. That's it.
Great, thank you. Any other questions?
I think we're good. Thank you
Okay,
so much.
Thank you very much.
And we're looking just, I don't see that there's any action for us, that we're just receiving this report.
That's correct. Just receive and file.
All right, we're good to go. Thank you. We are on to agenda item 8, communications. Anything from staff?
Nothing from staff.
Thank you. Number 9, commissioner comments. Anything from commissioners? Nothing. We are adjourned. Thank you and good night.